Welcome, everyone. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk to you today. What I want to talk about is analytics and what you can measure about the social collaboration that takes place within your organization, to see what is happening, but also to draw some conclusions on how to change your organization or perhaps also not change it. Now, I was asked by James McMahon, the HR director, to look at the current state of collaboration within CapLink and see whether or not I can actually draw some conclusions from that in terms of whether or not collaboration is needed and if there is actually a business case for it. And this already touches on two main things of why you would want to use analytics, which is that you need to ask yourself, what do I want to do with this? Why am I putting money or time or effort into even looking into analytics? And often it's either for justification, so for just making sure that you can justify the investments that you're making into changes, or it's either into focus and insights, things you need to address, things you want to know going on. Because we don't really know a lot about a lot of stuff that is going on within our companies, and especially when it comes to collaboration. So what we're going to look at is the actual information that I got from CapLink, which in this case consists of mail data and file data, because that are the main components of collaborative work right now. What we did is we looked at the log files, and luckily they saved all their log files, so we could go back up to 2014 and see which messages were sent. So the number of messages, who was the sender department, who was the receiving department, what was the date, the size, and the number of recipients. For files, we did a similar thing. We scanned the files on the system, which included all the files that were located on network shares, all the files that were located on home drives from people, but also all the files that were in attachments, and also the files that were in local profiles. So what do you store in your desktop, for instance, desktop folder? And we even did a preliminary scan of local PCs. So we had a little program run on the local PCs to check what kind of files were there. And I'll get to that later. Now, if there would have been an ESN platform, we would have probably also scanned that. But in this case, CapLink doesn't have one yet. So let's start with email. This is the current state of email within CapLink, this mail usage. What you see here is that mail has steadily been rising from about 600,000 to 1.2 million emails sent per month through this company, which is quite a lot. The average is around 900,000 per month, and that totals up to about 47,000 or 47 million mails that have been sent in the last 4.5 years. That seems like a lot. If we average it over the 1,200 people that work at CapLink, it comes down to about 17 during work hours and 3 outside work hours. Because we also looked at the time frame when these mails were sent. Mr. McMahon is a HR director, so he wanted to know whether or not people were working within their allotted time frames. And we did notice that there's actually quite a lot of people that are doing stuff in the weekends and evenings. Now, is that alerting? Well, it could be. In this case, I didn't differentiate between departments. If this is a factory operations like I understand, then there's probably a reason why people are working or emailing outside work hours, because maybe there's 24-hour shifts going on. What I also did here is in the lower bottom here is graph out how many recipients emails have. And one thing you see is that emails to one person total about 63% of all emails sent. And then it goes down quite quickly to about 10% sent to 2 recipients, another 10% to 3 recipients. It goes down, and then we get to 10 to 20 people. There's a little spike of about 4% and another spike for the 20 to 49 range, which I found quite noticeable. So I went a little deeper and looked into that. What you can say about mailing to groups of people is that it is not natural. Just think about it yourself. If you're sending an email and you have to type in 10 different names or 10 different email addresses, that's a lot of work. And that's not something people easily do. So when I look at mail data like this, then I immediately go, are they using mail groups? Because if it's just a single group that you can address and then address a group, then it's much easier. So that's something I would definitely look into as CapLink to see whether or not the usage of mail groups is perhaps quite prolific. And if so, and you are thinking about going towards an ESN system, then it could be a good idea to investigate which mail groups are most heavily used and maybe start from them to create some communities, to replace the mail groups. Take out the mail groups so you don't get them to still use the old mail groups, and then get people to move there. The other thing that it shows me is that people do have a need for group communication because they're emailing a lot, and they're emailing a lot to a lot of people. So there's probably something going there as well. And as the other thing, as you can see, is that certain departments mail more to larger groups than others do. So marketing has about 11.5% of its emails that is sent to more than 10 people at a time. And that totals more than 50% of their total email volume. So it might just be 11.5%. The total of the volume that they create in mail messages is much higher. So yes, it might seem low, those two groups, but they definitely have a big impact on what's going on. So I was talking about the communication and the needs apparently that people want to email with bigger groups. So the next step I did was to look into what are people or who are people emailing them with. And as you can see here, first of all, I made a differentiation between 3 types of email. The first type is email to, from, internal, between departments, which means that it's just I'm emailing someone in another department. The second group is emails I'm sending to someone in the same department, so in my team. And the third group is mails I'm sending externally. As you can see, the external-internal is about equal for the company-wide, but there's definite differences between the departments. Sport here, for instance, has a very big bubble when it comes to external mail, which is, of course, something you would expect. And the same here for sales, who are, by the way, quite prolific emailers, if I look at the number of and the size of the bubbles that they have. What is noticeable is that engineering here is emailing a lot within the department. And if I click on it, we can see what that means. No, that was not what I wanted. So I've now focused in on engineering. And what you see is that the external mail has gone down significantly. So they're mailing a lot internally, and they're mailing a lot within the department, because 33% of all the emails that they're sent internally are within their own department. I also noticed something here, and that is that there is a line going down per month when it comes to sending email, which is much stronger than I see on other departments. So if I go here, it's a rising line. Factory operations is also still mailing more and more, although it's leveling off a little. But engineering is definitely going down. And that triggered me to look at the next step, because what is going on within engineering? Again, we have the line of the average mails sent per week, which is going down starting in October. And then the next step what I did was I looked at the size of the mails. So the red line represents the size of emails sent by the engineering department. And what I see immediately is that in 2018, that average went up quite significantly. So from around 80, it went up to about 100 KB per mail. The next step I did was look at the number of attachments. And there too, I see that there is a rise. From Q2 2017, 2.6 attachment per email to 4.1. Now, I didn't know what was causing this, and my first assumption was maybe people were laid off, maybe something changed in the department. But what I did next was that I wanted to know the context. So I went into the company and talked to the people, in this case the engineering department, and asked them what changed around that time, what could influence the usage of mail. And they told me that they were experimenting with this tool where they could post internal status updates to each other. And they were quite fierce in putting that into use. And they did. So the internal mail within the own department started dropping off, which is great. That's definitely an effect. I also did a comparison between internal mail within the department and outside of the department, and that was clearly visible that it was mostly within the department that the effect was, because the rest of the company isn't using the same tool yet. What it didn't explain is why the size of emails went up. So the next step was that I asked them, so is it just status updates, or are you also sharing other information on there? And it turned out that the tool that they're using is mainly used for status updates. So the emails or the files are still being sent around through email and shared through email. Now, For me, this is an indication that it could be a very good idea to maybe look into whether or not this tool is fitting, because apparently there is also a need for more file sharing in this environment, and I'm not even going to the discussion whether or not people should collaborate in files or in other forms. There is clearly a need for some form of collaboration where information can be distributed, or that the tool might be actually well capable of doing that, but they are not aware of it or not using it to the right form. So maybe there's some training needed as well. Okay, so that was engineering. Now the next step I did was look at files. I told you we did a scan over all the files, and we found 41.9 million files within CapLink. That's a lot. You can see that United Kingdom, which had a head start, of course, because it's longer existing, has a lot more than the other two sites. And you can see here on the sites where the files are located mostly. So in the home drive, there's 51% of all the files that we found. Again, if you're talking about collaboration, these are files that are being stored individually. And that makes it, of course, hard to collaborate on it. So what I did was I also looked at the duplication rate on it. And for home drives is 66%. So 66% of all files in that home drive, in home drive directories, are actually duplicated throughout the home drives. People are storing a lot, but they're also copying it a lot. And the same goes for other elements. So network shares had 54% duplicates, which is lower than the home drive, which is already a good indication that when they start sharing files, that it's better. And it goes down to about 66 or 63% for email. Again, attachments, yes, we send them out a lot, and we store them a lot to all the other options we had. Now, in total, this came down to 61% duplication of files. So this is across organization and across platform, and that's also why the numbers below there differ. Because the duplication within the companies is much lower. Now, why is that? Well, we have different network shares for different sites, and they cannot share across the company. So they have apparently different servers for each site. The problem is that if you have a file, you can share it within your site quite easily by putting it on the network share, and that keeps the number of duplications low there. But if you then need to share that with another site, what happens is they send it through email, it gets stored on the other network share, and voila, we have another duplicate. So that's why the global number is much higher than the number for the individual sites. And this again points at perhaps having a system that allows you to do the more collaborative sharing of information might really have a big benefit. Also, think about the costs of having 61% duplicates in your environment, what you can save on network traffic, on storage, etc. Now, we looked a little at the categories of files that are duplicated. Of course, certain categories will have a lot more duplicates than others. For instance, font files, yes, they are highly duplicated. Why? Because, well, we all use the same font files. So 91% of those 16,000 font files we find were actually duplicates. What is much more important, though, is that Office files, which is everything created from Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and PDFs, also have a 52% of duplication. And this is what I would call my collaborative files. So these are the ones that I would definitely take a good look at what's going on. Now, my time is short, so I couldn't show you everything I can do with this data. This is just a short introduction. One more point. While looking at the file directories on profiles, we found quite a lot of mentions of Dropbox. And okay, it's only 0.06% of the total 41 million files that we found on the file shares, but still, that's 25,000 files that are currently in Dropbox. If that is a sanctioned usage of this application, then there's nothing wrong. But within a lot of companies, people are trying to find collaborative options to share files and implementing options like Dropbox or other options that are there, WeTransfer, etc., which aren't always sanctioned. So this is an alerting thing. Again, look at the number of Office files. 4.3 thousand files are in the current Dropbox environment. Could be something to take a look at. So, coming back to why we did this, can analytics help in a collaborative environment? Can it say something about your ESN usage? Yes, it can. Right now, Kapling doesn't have an ESN yet, so I just looked at mail and file data. But imagine what you can do if you take this data, combine it with the data we can get from an ESN, and start seeing trends and things that are changing. It allows you to focus in to the areas where you can have quick wins, like seeing, for instance, which department is using a lot of internal email and maybe trying to get them to use a community instead. And it allows you to really see the effect of implementing an ESN.